creating patterns through some kind of mechanism, a calculator, a cognitive bias is essentially what is being enacted here. And not to mention multiple calculators. And so I put out an article today where I think I've discovered how this thing works. Like many of the various, I believe, um, tricks on the world stage that keep us locked into a false paradigm, I think the end times prophecy needs to be looked at because I think it's based on some kind of a logical fallacy. Like, how are all these various preachers able to look at these Bible verses, look at the news, and conclude the world ends next week? And then how is it that they're never right and no one calls them out on it? And the Seventh day Adventists had predicted that Jesus was going to show up in like October of 18 something and he didn't show up. And so instead of disbanding, they said, well, this is the foundation of our religion. And they just became more faithful. Or the I Am Temple, they went into their doomsday bunkers because China and Russia were going to nuke us. It didn't happen. The cult is still around today. They believed that they prayed so hard they saved the world. Now, if you're not going to accept a wrong answer and you're just going to proceed as though it didn't happen, well, now your whole premise is unfalsifiable. You can never be proven wrong. And that's where we're getting at here. So if you follow my blog at timosman.blog, or you get any of my newsletters, you probably got this one in your inbox. Gematria Sharpshooters, Endless Cycles of Doom Hype. So doom hype is a big thing. And it really reached a crescendo with the Super Bowl. And when it didn't get nuked, a lot of people were disappointed. I wasn't. I like Las Vegas. But I was more curious as to how are they arriving at these very specific things. Like, it's undeniable that there's a lot of scripting and perception management and PR stunts. The entire psyop with Swift and Kelsey, how it's just basically a reality TV show, soap opera for the masses, mind junk for the masses. But there are certain things that we were noting, like look how many iconic females, female icons who've died tragic deaths that have been associated with Taylor Swift. Undeniable. You know, Amelia Earhart, she's related to her. They just found her plane as she was going to fly over that area. So there are some intentional injections of symbolism, of character archetypes, and there are patterns that we can discern. But gematria complicates things. And there's another aspect to it too, which is days between events, where it gets to be a little ambiguous. Like, and this is what I think the cause of it is. And I think it comes down to a certain logical fallacy. Let me go and make sure everyone's here. All right, Diana South from DLive 737. Frank Murr, Oswaldo, Osher, Symbia, AJ206 on YouTube. Peace Circle from Twitch. Got some Twitchers in here. Kevin Mooring, Let's Go, Ollie Goering, Redacted Bigley, Trevor Camplain, thank you for joining. Mom with Sons, Elephant Tusks, Reverse History, awesome. Austin 108 says Gematria is BS. Yes. Well, you know what? Here's what it really is. It's actually part of a way of determining mystical connections between things, but I think it's specifically related to the Torah and Kabbalism and magic. In fact, that you use this stuff in magic when you're encoding your rituals, but they're not using it as a predictive model, like or suggesting that you can predict the future with it. And that's what I'm criticizing here. I'm not suggesting that there's no value in it and that it's not relevant to our discussions here, because we're always talking about symbolism, and this is a huge part of it. And we often talk about the strange coincidences with numbers and symbols, but I've made it a point not to adopt anything that allows you to, in any way, create a false impression. I'm just looking at what they report, the patterns that exist. You know, like Rodney King hit 33 times with the baton. Like these things, the associations with the name King and these various psyops and the repeated numbers, like these are things we can point at that they cannot deny. They cannot deny the sun set at 8:46 in the Twin Cities. George Floyd suffocated 8:46. 9/11 kicks off 8:46. And we can find common denominators between all these various events. But we're remaining objective, looking at this as what it appears to be, what I call a meta script. But Our history is nothing but a collection of fake news, and the fake news is whatever the power elite want us to believe. History is a record of mass media going back. Just as they bend our daily news, they have bent our history. But they don't leave anything up to chance. They write the news in advance and they implement it on the world stage as a reality TV show disguised as news. That's pretty much how it works. Like, we're behind. They're actually operating on a different timeline than we are. The news benders who bend our reality, who bend the horizon. They control reality this way. It's time control. You have to watch Newsbenders if you have not. It's a 30-minute theater play from 1968 or something, and it explains this whole idea as a hypothetical, but they're writing the news 5 years in advance, and I think it's more like 50 or 100. They write it in broad strokes and they get into the details and the nuance, but my point of it is this is history, and his story, he is Big Brother, this predetermined version of events. Everything else will get burned, deleted, banned. They don't care to censor us because they know eventually they're going to have the final say. But my point of it is this control of the narrative runs so deep that they use what we call predictive programming, repetitive messaging in all media to condition us to accept the fake history as they present it as quote news. That is the most logical explanation for predictive programming. Conditioning, literally programming. But truthers have mystified it. And they say, no, this is synchronicity, this is God, this is AI, this is dark occultists behind the scenes telling us what they're going to do to dodge karma. They have all these ways of taking it out of the realm of media analysis and then adding on all kinds of spiritual components and dark magic. And that takes it away from the essential fact that we're looking at man manipulating man. But they take the target off of man as far as who's behind this and they put it on something supernatural. And I'm trying to break away from that. And this is where this Demetria person and I were kind of debating. He's like, how can you say God's not behind this? Well, I have an answer. So let's go ahead and get to it. Ted Stryker's joined us. Thank you for joining. Nicholas Pitts says, we've been looking at a government shutdown on March 1st, the real New Year's Day, in order to place another 11.8 billion to Ukraine through a forced budget. Okay, March 1st, mark your calendars. But what I want to start doing is this. I want to start holding prophets accountable so we can call them false prophets. If I say the world's going to end on 228 and it doesn't, you can call me a false prophet. But none of these false prophets online are being called out for it. And what I think is more important here is the deconstruction of their arguments, because I think these logical fallacies represent a blind spot for most people who are in Trutherville still. That's why they're there. And I think we can do without those. I think we have to, cleanse the doors of perception. We have to basically remove any kind of filter that leads you down these various rabbit trails to false conclusions. And that's why I put up this article today. Let me go ahead and get to it here. Gematria Sharpshooters, Endless Cycles of Doom Hope. Using Gematria to predict false flags is applying the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, which makes them appear to be on target while creating the perceptions of patterns that upon closer inspection do not exist. Gematria is the computation of individual letters of words and utilizing their numerical equivalents to form connections with other words or concepts. For example, Satan is 55. So any other word that adds to 55 will be connected to Satan. Santa, for example. This is a connection, but my question is it a meaningful connection? Both Jesus and Lucifer add to 74. You'd think these are contradictions. And you can find many words that have no relevance whatsoever. And those are conveniently ignored. And this is the basis of the fallacy. It's about ignoring the misses, focusing on the hits. However, the basis of this fallacy is that the target's too big, and they draw a circle around clusters of hits after the fact. So the Gematria calculator enlarges the target. The radius of the target is so large that no matter where the shots hit, they only have to find a few close together ones to create the appearance of accuracy. And these Calculators make it impossible to be wrong and make it easy to prove anything right. And if one calculator doesn't have the number they need, there are other calculators, other versions. So patterns are there. The media is a tightly controlled wing of world government. My question here is, why would we want to toss numerology-based prophecies into our media analysis? It seems to me that this is the same mentality that mystifies predictive programming with revelation of the method, which is claimed to be a way for the bad guys to avoid bad karma for bad things they're doing in the future by somehow gaining our consent by putting it in the movies first. And the problem with this conclusion, aside from the lack of evidence, is it implies the bad things are happening, like in the movies that precede them, in eerily coincidental ways. This rules out the possibility that the bad things are hoaxed, faked, simulated media events passed off as real to gullible and brainwashed people. So this gematria person had said to me, there's no way man could plan all of this, with examples of movie release dates that corresponded to contemporary events, but spaced apart by a certain number of days, which stood out by repeated digits, like 666s or 777s. So they would say, this movie was released on this date, and 66 months later, in 6 days, this happened. And so they suggest that these numbers signify important or significant events to come, like false flags. Now, the problem with this is that, one, we don't know what these numbers mean. Like, I'm sorry, is there a dictionary somewhere where if it's 5 sevens, it means a terror attack? If it's 4 sevens, it means something with a pop singer and a football player? Like, what makes these numbers intrinsically significant? What's your basis for this? But moreover, they suggest that these are foreshadowing false flags. And false flags are real events with a false explanation, or they're instigated. But the problem is that they've never been right. Trump's headwind was supposed to happen on 8/4. A lot of them jumped on that. It didn't happen. I asked a few of them, hey, what's the deal? They just pretended like nothing happened. JFK was supposed to show up, didn't show up. I'm like, what happened here? I thought the storm was coming. I thought the storm was coming this month, or the month after, or 2 weeks later. Like, when are we going to have the 10 days of darkness, the blackout? I thought we were supposed to have a blackout in November. Didn't happen. But all of them were able to point to many examples in the past to suggest that, oh, this was planned, it's coming. So again, this is not real predictive programming in the sense that we describe it. The problem with this, again, is that they've never been right, and they're not media skeptics. They believe in the alt version of the news. So they're not exactly skeptics. But his argument to me was that these timings are too precise. There's no way mere humans could arrange this. Therefore, it must be a higher power. It must be God ordering these events. To assume divine intervention because the coincidences are too voluminous for man to arrange is beginning with the premise that these are real patterns. And that's where he's coming at me with. He's like, how can you deny that God's here? Because look at these patterns. So I had to challenge that assumption first. Are these valid patterns? Because if you accept